VortiX and LucifroN, English Mirror, I feel like we're in for an eye candy.
That's right, ladies and gents. Game number 2, an English mirror. Sorry, I just had to have the appropriate reaction. We've seen it. We've just been disgusted by it, but don't panic.
Look at the sheep.
All right? Don't cringe. Yeah, they've been mating. Mummy and daddy sheep love each other very much. They've got a family going there. But remember, for anyone who's disgusted by the hour-long imminent English mirror games that we've experienced on our ladders, this is Canal, baby. Limited space at home. And also, this is Golden League 2 Round 1, which means no stone walls. These guys are going to have to fight tooth and nail for their property in the mid-map.
Indeed, looks like we're going to have a very forward-esque dock here by VortiX. Lucifer actually posturing with a slightly more passive one, and for those of you that actually don't remember the previous sets from last weekend on this one, or you simply haven't been there when they happened, well, the density of shorefish available increases as you get closer to the middle of the canal. So the more forward your dock is, the more shorefish you have available.
And the interesting thing is that this is a civ that typically likes its wood, right? Honestly, you'd think that the national animal of the English is the beaver. It's not, but you'd think it is. Just because of how much wood it goes through, right? Wood for farms, wood for the fishing side, the leverage in the galley, longbows, all the racks you're going to want to push out men-at-arms. Like, you know, so many things about this civ tends to lead them to be, like, dominant in the wood department. There's not many other civs that want more of it. Maybe Abastis is up there. But the problem on this map is you're limited in your amount. You have to play away from your base. And that's where the English playstyle has to change, and has been changing, Lida. We've seen a lot more players as the English playing out into pocket resources than I think we've ever seen in the history of Age of Empires 4.
And I would love to see that over here. As you said, you can work for those pocket resources, especially in an English mirror, simply because if your opponent goes for longbows, then they're going to have a slow-moving army. They also have to respect the positioning of your army, so it's somewhat unlikely, especially at the early stage of the game, that they will push those pocket resources that you mentioned. So you could easily justify moving out for the hunt and possibly getting away with it because your opponent simply won't have the mobility to hit you there.
And, you know, it kind of makes me think, do we see Council Hall still? Or do we see Abbey of Kings? Because if you're thinking you need flexibility, the ability to be anywhere on the map, you're thinking the Horseman. And the Horseman plus the King, that's a lethal combo.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the more intriguing things that we could see over here is indeed the Abbey and using a King. But we'll have to see if that's gonna be an attempt being made by either side. It's definitely one of those plays which can have a high upside, but it's also something that could be extremely risky. So we might just see the good old-fashioned Council Hall and say, okay, I trust that I can do the same thing as my opponent and outplay him with micro, with slight differences in efficiency, rather than trying something that may look fancy, but it's also very risky and could lose you the game quickly.
It's like I think on this type of map, like it's kind of laid in a way that you want to go King, but the one thing that stops you and makes Council Hall look a bit sexier, not only the limited space, so you're saving like you need, you know, double archery range space compared to one for Council Hall, it's the fact that Lombos outrange everything on water, right? So you can just pick apart your opponent's naval without ever technically needing navy forces of your own.
That's a great point. That's a great point indeed, that King has somewhat limited value when there is not much that you can do raiding-wise, and given how compressed the starting base of players are, that's likely the case. And as you said, longbows can be a great way to harass the fishing ships. And look at that. Talk about practice partners, these two being. Same idea again, walling off the middle. One of the advantages that VortiX has, though, is that his walls are much more to the front. So from positional perspective, his positioning looks slightly better.
Yeah, I'd actually love to see now with VortiX's position, just like drop an outpost at the crossing. It won't be used right now, but it's the type of thing that pays off later, right? You know, when you get out here with a few Lombos, you'll have the attack speed aura advantage, and your opponent won't, unless Lucy wants to reaction into an outpost of his own. So Council Hall coming out for Lucy, and VortiX surprisingly delayed in comparison here, actually. He's going to find himself probably about 2 Longbows behind, which usually isn't a big deal when you're defending your base. But it's not your base you need to defend in this map. It's the river in the center.
Yeah, the eco balance was slightly different between the two. You had 2 extra villagers for VortiX being on wood, And he also went all the way up to like 60 to 70 gold being, or extra gold being mined over the ones that he needed for the feudal age age up. You look at LucifroN, he's got 1 gold in the bank. He optimized this to perfection. He pulled away the villagers from gold immediately upon getting the gold needed. Whereas for VortiX, he was a little heavier on wood, a little less heavy on food. So his eco wasn't perfectly balanced. Had to wait a little longer for feudal age, so he's floating a little gold right now.
And check this outpost. This outpost will be envisioned a LucifroN, but the reason VortiX can do it is because what he was doing when they were both walling. LucifroN wasn't trading fire. VortiX was attacking his villager. So you can see on the HP bars, if he came up to contest, he would just lose. There's no possible way you could stop this outpost.
That's a great point indeed. This is seen by LucifroN, but it's not like he can do much against it. And when it comes to the gold, don't forget that VortiX has been banking up gold as he was aging up. So he can afford a combat ship very soon, although he opts to go for longbows first, tries to slow down those longbows approaching, even if it comes at the price of losing his scout, because he knows how important getting that tower up is.
Yeah, in fairness, the gold, like, you're not going to use it for many combat ships, right? That would just be demos. The bigger deal here is he can go into a blacksmith's and get the upgrades ahead of Lucy, which is very beneficial in this situation. Because if you get the steel arrows, it's not only going to buff your longbows, it's also going to buff your archer ships.
That's a good point, and you see that the tower going up is also going to force LucifroN to divert his forces to the south, and he might need to find a new angle to hit those fishing ships from. And as you said, Steeled Arrow coming in here for VortiX. Now, LucifroN had enough gold for that upgrade himself, but he chooses to go for Wheelbarrow. And looking at that eco distribution, you have to ask the question whether he's actually flirting with the idea of a fast castle age here.
It's a lot of people still on wood. If you want the fastest castle time, you would just sacrifice additional fishing production at this stage and rush up. I think he's just going to invest into Navy. He's waiting to see if VortiX forces him first. Because, like, if you do have to invest in Navy, right, like, you're up against this outpost. It's kind of a blocker. So you know you'd have to go for melee on land first, which he hasn't actually gone for yet, right? Like, neither player is invested in Iraq. So neither player in an English mirror wants to be the first player to do that.
Indeed, very heavy on wood is still LucifroN. Has a mill already. He's going to have Wheelbarrow, also going for double broadaxe. So a much more eco-focused approach we are seeing from him. And he's also going to be the first one to put out a combat ship in the canal. Gotta be careful
it's
with
tough
that
when you've got this barrier. When you say careful with the scout, VortiX already threw his away at the first 2 longbows. I think that was actually a misclick originally. He just got too close to the sun. Now, longbows sniping out the villager. Nice play there. Will cost Lucy 2 longbows on the exit, though.
Yeah, I love how he used that scout out there, despite the fact that it's a little risky when you have so many sheep trailing it. But that scout was dancing back and forth just to absorb some arrow fire. LucifroN was like, okay, I'm fine taking 90% damage, I just want to draw away a couple of arrows from my longbows, and he did just that.
And this is the most efficient way LucifroN can now answer that outpost. It's an outpost that you know your opponent will not have arrow slits on, right? Because he hasn't gone onto the stone at all. So you're safe from the extra arrow fire, the extra range, and if he garrisons it, even if you get close enough, you've got the fishing boats to heal through the damage. Just a great read by Lucy, and eventually after that, he can target down the wall. So now it forces VortiX to reactionary Springald ship because of the potential future threat.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, LucifroN, he didn't commit much to feudal age aggression. He was just probing. He was the one being the aggressor. But off the back of that, he got a lot of eco upgrades. You see, he's got Wheelbarrow, double broadaxe. He's just finished the survival techniques upgrade. So he's completely content fighting this out and just evenly trading armies because his economy is slightly more effective than the one from VortiX. Although it looks like VortiX is actually going to beat him to castle age at this pace.
Yeah. And that's impressive when you consider he went for the blacksmith upgrades. So, like, VortiX stopped off for extra. But the cool thing by doing this is, like, because his units are more efficient at trading one-on-one, it forces LucifroN to kind of overkill, right? Look at the production, look at the count. Sure, he's taking a good exchange here, but every extra longbow he builds puts him further away from a castle age timing. All said and done, though, look at the drop-off. Lucy, out of nowhere, is still going to beat him to the punchline. And you know, if you do the raw maths, it kind of makes sense when you consider the cost of the blacksmiths and then both of the ranged resistance and damage upgrades compared to Wheelbarrow and Broadaxe on its own.
Yeah, especially if you consider that it's not like we have seen gigantic battles of longbows. There were losses on both sides, but we're talking about, let's say, 10 longbows lost on each side. And that's exactly what VortiX had to invest the archer upgrades for. Whereas on the other side, LucifroN just said, okay, I'm going to have double broadaxe, I'm going to have wheelbarrow, and that's kind of something that compensates for slightly higher losses. And now, if you add the fact to the equation that he's also moving out with that town center, it's going to further delay his castle age.
Yeah, and VortiX, notice he goes a little bit turly here, just in case LucifroN comes looking. Lucy, you know, sure, he's got a worse placement for his King's Palace, but you're the English, you can kind of layer in farms. On top of that, it's kind of the fort of his base, so it gives an extra kind of defense point. And also, just by getting the tech up quicker, he now beats his opponent at the punchline into heavy cavalry. Double stable's about to complete, and he has enough to push out of both.
And don't forget, VortiX committed very heavily to the longbow play in Feudal Age, got both of the blacksmith upgrades, so that may even have been spotted by LucifroN. If he clicks the enemy longbows, he sees the upgrades being there, so he knows fully well that VortiX invested into those, he invested into less equal upgrades, so that heavy cavalry play will pay off even more so.
That's the thing, right? If you don't want to play into more archers, then going for those blacksmith upgrades is just a pointless delay. Sure, you'll come back for it later, but now you see VortiX is making this conversion. He's coming over the top because he understands with his later tech timing, he's going to be behind on knight production. But now with that kind of eco-different situation, when you consider things like the outpost placement by VortiX, the extra resources burned in feudal, LucifroN should be able to come over the top of melee tech upgrades ahead. I don't expect it though, just simply because, you know, with longbows, it makes sense to get those steeled arrow upgrades because of the percentage difference in damage. On knights that hit for 24 damage, increasing the damage by 1 is quite the lamau. It just feels kind of trivial, right?
Yep, it's a very minimal impact. Now, one of the things that is a large discrepancy between these two is that VortiX is expanding to the south with that DC. He's also walling himself off, so he's securing neutral resources. On the other side, LucifroN has a bunch of villagers on berries to the north. He's going to slowly wall those off, but it's not like those are very well defended and could easily be subject to raiding.
Ouch. Ow. Okay, so I know I said that like the melee damage increase is like, but now I think LucifroN wishes he had Undermesh because those are still feudal age longbowmen that just ripped him.
Exactly. It's actually very interesting to look at the fact that you would assume that knights will do really well against those feudal age longbows, but you have to keep in mind that those longbows have the attack upgrade and the knights don't have any armor upgrades right now. So those leftover longbows actually do quite a lot of decent damage, and it's going to be a quick pivot into men-at-arms, I assume? Could be even just spearmen being mixed in, because he sees that longbow numbers aren't increasing, but a bit of a risky call here for LucifroN, if you ask me.
Well, like, if the players are going to men-at-arms, he hasn't built a blacksmith still, right? So, like, there's still that kind of concern. Obviously, he can build it on a delay because MAA don't move fast. You could also just go armor-clad instead, which is more cost-efficient than blacksmith upgrades. But I think even for the knights, like, you just saw the snipe down effect. Like, if those longbows do get upgraded, VortiX is at a point where he doesn't want to. But if he goes up to 15 and he upgrades, these knights just get sniped. Well, it's like they will begin to clash. So chasing on the longbows, but with the knight count as it is, I feel a little bit better for Lucy. Like, he's just getting to pick apart a few of the longbows on the backside. And the second wave of knights coming in, I mean, VortiX should be able to just run this through.
Still a bit of a dance back and forth here. Don't forget, LucifroN invested into double barracks over here, so he's fine sniping down the longbows because then he can add a couple of spears to support his army with. Nice little micro on his side, pulling back the weak knights, but he's slowly forfeiting his own longbows here, and in the end, this feels like just a very even trade on both sides.
Yeah, but I feel better for LucifroN here. Like, look at the knight comparison, what's left at the end of this. They're scraped at each other. They're also both now going into relics, so this is a very delicate phase of VortiX. If he loses additional knights compared to Lucy, then Lucy can afford to peel them off to chase for the relic locations. Or alternatively, he just doubles down on the main fight, and then you're talking about a raw damage increase, right? That should just lead to heavier casualties on VortiX's side.
It's actually marvelous to see how similar the timings of these two players are. As you said, both of them are now going for relics. They are essentially playing identical game right now. Knights play. There's a small pivot to spearmen from LucifroN, but at the end of the day, even the monk timings are comparable. They are racing for relics, and so far that race is also rather balanced. And speaking of pivots, here comes the spearmen as well from VortiX. It's crazy how similar their mindsets are.
Yeah, and it's funny because like going into this, I would have given VortiX the edge on English. I've watched both of these players for a very long time, and I think VortiX's English has consistently been a bit better. Now, maybe it's just because when you throw in the variable of against each other, it's different, but I honestly am more confident in the way that LucifroN's playing this game right now than VortiX. It's only small differences, but every step, Lucy seems to be slightly ahead.
I feel like it's a matter of the eco upgrades. You see, once again, now the food upgrade coming in for LucifroN, not something that VortiX has, and I think LucifroN sees it very well, that this is a poking and probing style game. Neither of them are willing to dive, and neither of them are willing to commit to big battles. So he can afford to play a little greedier and focus a little more on eco upgrades, and it's something that's slowly paying off.
I mean, it's like just all the small things. The fact they both walled north side, right? Obviously, there's the King's Palace is the big difference maker so far, and that has helped VortiX to accelerate his knight growth, right? That's why you now see him take the lead, is you have to remember this is deer compared to a slow farm setup, but I'm expecting LucifroN to kind of pivot. I think for the moment he's munching on berries, but once he's cleared them, he'll use that palisaded area north to build out all his farms.
Yeah, and once again, just talk about securing those small pieces of advantages. Sacred Site on the north being kept by LucifroN, and down south, big walls coming up here for VortiX. He knows fully well that he's facing a lot of knights, might as well wall himself off, and just make sure that raids are next to impossible for LucifroN. That's actually a big difference between the two. LucifroN did not really bother walling himself on the south so far.
Can you actually think of a slower mirror matchup than English?
Nope, not at all, but
It's
just
interesting,
look at
right?
how mirrory this mirror is. It's a stupid
Yes.
word, I know, but look at that. Even the veteran longbow upgrade comes in at an identical time. They're doing the exact same things with next to identical timing.
And now that's going to lead to an assault before the outpost goes up. So timing is actually not that bad for VortiX if he can skirt to the left side. But for the moment, LucifroN, maybe it's hard to see because they're already golden, but they are glowing right now because of that attack speed aura. VortiX does not want to take a fight into that. He needs to kind of skirt this into the neutral point, but even there, LucifroN has the edge. Just look at the military pot cap and look at the exchanges.
Yeah, this is a better army in the tower. Now with the network of castles aura, that's the big thing.
He's coming.
Spearman charging.
VortiX, like, he needs to get out of it. This is not a fight he can take, but he's trying to cover the wall build-up. But behind this, he's losing so much. Military pop cap lead now for Lucy is 20+. And look at the aggressive outposting. Baits more attention away, and now he can confidently park himself on the edge of VortiX's territory, ready to push deeper.
Oh, those towers are coming in so clutch. And this forces a tap out from VortiX. We've been praising how good VortiX was in the previous set that he played against Beastie at identifying when he can take a fight and when he cannot. Now LucifroN did the same thing to him. Saw a tiny advantage, realized that this is a fight he can take and he can win the game with, and he did just that.
And we always talk about mirror matchups being this kind of, small differences make the mile, right? But this was actually small seconds make the difference. Because what happened there, you saw it. VortiX pulled back until the glow was gone, clearly recommitted to the fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if we check player perspective, he was quickly producing more villagers or something else in his base, right? He was doing something somewhere else because his knights instantly recommit, and he thinks that's a good fight because when you look away for 2 or 3 seconds and that gold glow all of a sudden triggers, by the time you realize it's online, you're already 2, 3, 4 knights behind. Brilliant read by Lucy, and I love the fact that he layered additional outposts for kind of a staggered activation that meant that VortiX always had to keep retreating.
And as you said, it's not just the activation of the network of castles, also the vision. VortiX didn't have a scout nearby, didn't have towers. He had limited vision on LucifroN's army to anticipate the exact size and composition. Whereas on the other side, those towers gave perfect vision to LucifroN, and he knew fully well what he was up against. He knew very well that he can take that fight, and he did just that. Wins the game. Now he's up 2-0 against VortiX here in this best of 7 finals of the